Hello, guys. Welcome to the Techpoint Africa Podcast. Your usual host, Oluwanifemi, will not be joining us today, but she'll definitely be available next week. On today's podcast, we'll be discussing some rather interesting stories. The first is Tanzania's plan to ban unlicensed lending apps. And secondly, we'll be looking at Bosun Tijani's plan around his recent announcement where he said Nigeria now has a startup house in San Francisco, USA. We'll be looking at what that really means and what it means for Nigeria startup ecosystem. And lastly, we'll be looking at Space Tax report from 2023 that gives us an idea of um, different how people use different payment channels. And as usual, I have with me Jim Gozurim. We'll be looking at all these stories together. Jim Gozurim, how are you doing today?
All good.
Well, that's good to know. Uh, don't worry, you feel better by the time we start the podcast.
I'll find out.
Yeah. All right, let's start with Tanzania. So, Tanzania is facing some issues with lending platforms, and as you can imagine, the major problem is these unlicensed lending platforms engaging on ethical habits of um, getting their money back from their customers. So they threaten, they do all sort of things to get their money back, and the government wants to ban these platforms, right? Yes, but one thing that I'm curious about is how big of an issue is this in Tanzania? Talking about unlicensed loan apps.
Very big, apparently. But so this is not exactly banning. I guess ban is not the right word here. It's not exactly a ban. It's basically a circular by the Bank of Tanzania saying don't don't do business with unlicensed loan apps, and it's the reasons are very obvious. The the same problems we have in Nigeria, in Kenya, are the same problems that we face in Tanzania. Okay, maybe not always on the same scale,
Okay.
but it's sort of the same, where you have first very low access to credit, and if you have low access to credit and the economy isn't going so well, then you are almost always living paycheck to paycheck. That's even assuming you have a job. So there's a huge problem with access to credit across Africa. Tanzania isn't left out, and as a result, people are resorting to loan apps. So something I saw was the same strategies that are used in Nigeria, shaming people, um, calling people on their contact list, colleagues, relatives, and all of that. Is literally the same playbook, and it had me wondering, like, could it be just the same group of people who are running similar rackets across Africa? So yeah, that's my
I
basic
remember
theory
that
for the
someone
week.
someone called you that they used you as a guarantor.
Yes, yes.
And they said whose obituary they said they were going to post.
Yeah, they said they're going to post the person's obituary, and I'm like, bro, I'm not. Like,
Wait, did you know the
first of all,
person?
the person that they were calling me
Yeah.
for. Oh yes, I did.
Oh,
It's
okay.
someone I know,
Oh.
but that was a terrible time to call me because I was pissed off about something else. So I transferred the aggression to the person that was threatening me,
I
which is
know.
such a badass move when you think about it.
Yeah, exactly it is.
But then, where was I with Tanzania? Yeah, so uh, you have cases where people go take loans, and then they have like really crazy terms. I read of one where they basically had to pay 60% interest rate.
What?
Yes, they had to pay 60% interest rate. So the thing was that the person took the loan, and they read the terms and conditions, at least according to what they said. They read the terms and conditions. It was bad, but they needed money badly. So they were like, you know what? Let's do it. And a couple of days later, the loan was up. They needed to repay. They couldn't pay. So those guys came for him, and he's like, come on, it's really bad. So yeah, it's a very big problem in Tanzania.
So I really don't see how I mean if you ban the apps, yes, but I think people will still find a way to go to this platform because like you said, access to credit is a very big issue
In Africa, yeah.
in Africa. So shouldn't the governments try fixing access to credit, which I also think there are people that can go through the right means of providing those credits. But they are also afraid that if I don't resort to threatening people, I might not get my money back.
Mm.
It seems like the problem is really to tackle that access to credit.
Yes, that's if you tackle access to credit, you reduce predatory lending by you reduce it significantly.
Mm.
So yes, the government can say they want to tackle access to credit, but it's tough, to be honest. Yeah, but yeah, that's one way to fix it. One problem is that it's not just loan apps. Loan apps are very easy, which is why there's a focus on that. But I don't know if you remember, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, we were on a bike, and I don't know if it was you or not. Okay, I don't know, but we were like in that our neighborhood, and I saw a small shack, maybe not exactly a shack, let's call it a small shop, where someone was advertising loan services. And it had me thinking, it's not just those guys with funny names on Google Play Store anymore. It's also the person on your street who is doing that. Now, of course I don't know the details of their operation, but they are very unlikely to be licensed by anybody. And if they are unlicensed, it means that they could. I mean, we've always known about loan sharks. Loan sharks didn't come with the internet, to be fair. So that's another issue. But your question about fixing access to credit, I mean, yes, it's very important. First, you need to incentivize people to lend, which means you need to build out an entire credit infrastructure. Um, a lot of people do not have access to, like, they don't have their information on credit bureaus. There's also no, I don't know if I'll call it the justice mechanism for defaulters. And I know people say that Nigerians are bad borrowers, but I just think it's a case of no consequence leading to that, because really, who do you really think wants to repay a loan when you could use this money to do something else? Like, anywhere in the world. So I think if we had those mechanisms to make you pay every time you default, we could have a better credit system. But until we fix that, and that's the problem. The government keeps on saying they want to do this, but how are we? What are we doing? We are not seeing any concrete evidence that you're doing something. So we've talked. I mean, everyone has talked about making it harder for you to default on your loans, and can you link it to something that is very, very important? So you are owing, and then we say you can't renew your international passport, for example, or you're owing, and we say you can't. So because you're owing, for example, we say the loan that other people are getting at the 15% interest rate, now you have to get it at 25% because you have a high, like, your credit risk, or it's linked to your ability to rent a house. But to be now, you don't even. In fact, see, the problem is, first of all, we do not have a very good national database, or national database of Nigerians. We don't even know how many we are in this country. Government doesn't know. We don't know how many people are in the financial system, for example. Okay, we do know that. Like, we don't have synergized data on Nigerians, and if you don't have that data,
Is it something we can like get like a
private,
private sector to fix? Like the same way
yeah,
we did NIBS, if you can have like someone fix something like that. Like have
yes,
people have credit system, there's this credit scoring system and things
no.
like that.
So okay, yes, to a part of it, we could have the private sector build out the infrastructure,
Okay.
but the the part where people who default have to pay for defaulting, how does the private sector enforce it without a regulatory backing? Because, yeah, like, for example, we have GSI, which the CBN backs, makes it easy for a bank or a financial institution to penalize you or to take their money back from any account. But if you don't have something similar, it gets difficult. So yes, the private sector can build out infrastructure, but the disciplinary measures has to be backed by a regulator.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I really hope Africa can, get a grip on because it will really, if you look at how it makes people outside the country, how they can easily purchase things like houses and a lot of things that they need. You see how it really makes sense. And then there's also the question of people now living in debt all their life.
Yeah,
Those are
well,
just a lot of
those
issues
are
that
different conversations,
yeah,
but at least let a good number of us have access to credit.
yeah.
Then let's worry about debt alongside. But
Okay.
let's start with that. To listen to the full episode of this podcast, visit podcast.techpoint.africa or search for Techpoint Africa Podcast on your favorite podcast platforms.